welcome to the Why on Earth Community's Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series. Today we have the opportunity to visit with Stone Hunter. Hey Stone.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good, happy to be here.
We're really excited. Today we get to get a tour of an amazing sustainable built house that Stone recently constructed. And before we start on our tour, let me just tell you a little about Stone's background. He is a biodynamic farming practitioner and former consultant at Sustainable Settings Ranch in Carbondale, Colorado, which is, I think, where we met.
It is.
Yeah. He's born and raised at Sunrise Ranch and attended the River Song Waldorf School and later graduated from the International Baccalaureate program in Fort Collins, Colorado. After attending Evergreen State College and working on permaculture-based projects in Costa Rica and Panama, he began farming in 2013 at Happy Heart Farm in Fort Collins. In 2015, Stone began working at Sustainable Settings, where he completed a 2-year North American Biodynamic Apprenticeship program, training with experience in dairy cattle operations, holistic grazing, grain cultivation, draft horse implementation, stone masonry, CSA gardening, green construction, natural beekeeping, and more. Stone facilitated the project management of the Arise Permaculture Action Days in 2015, 16, and 17. Currently, he lives in Paonia, Colorado, and is working with Skyhawk Construction, building straw bale, passive solar homes, while teaching and participating within the permaculture and biodynamic movements. And Stone, it's so great to have this opportunity to visit with you and get a sense of what goes into a heart-centric process of building a super high-performing, sustainable building. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, exciting to share a little bit about what we're doing in this small little town of Paonia in the mountains of Colorado, where fortunately we do have some looser building codes, but everything we build is up to code and beyond. And this house we're standing in front of is a straw bale home. Not load bearing, there's structures around the window bays, and then there's a box beam. It's a 2-story straw bale home, and there is a box beam on top of it that is compressed down. So we can get into some of the logistical layouts of how we actually build these homes. But I would like to just say that these homes we're building are designed by Vida Foundation that's based here in Paonia, and they're designed as therapeutic homes.
Oh wow.
So they're designed with elements, the materials we use, the design elements, and the community efforts that come into building these homes are really about creating vibrant spaces that we can live in, spaces that will actually make us feel better in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts to be in them, and also be built with non-toxic materials, because we want the spaces that we inhabit to be full of life and to feed our creativity, give us good sleep, and also be good for the earth and the materials that were used to build them.
You know, it's so important. I know that some of my friends and colleagues at the U.S. Green Building Council have published all kinds of materials and studies indicating a variety of health and respiratory problems tied directly to the sort of mainstream building materials we've been using over the last several decades. Many of the finishes, many of the actual framing materials, the carpets, etc., are off-gassing all kinds of carcinogenic chemicals, basically, and we know this is one of the contributors to high rates in childhood asthma. So to have instead natural materials, which of course is what our species is used to going back in time, obviously is going to have a tremendous health benefits on the physical level. Mm-hmm. And then it sounds like you're also doing beautiful things with the design aesthetic and the energetics of the space to affect us also on the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the psychological levels.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So we're paying attention to the materials that we use and where they're sourced from. for instance, in a lot of the detailing work, we've been using these BioShield products that I believe actually originate in Germany, but unfortunately that they have to come from so far, but there's almost no VOC, no volatile
organic compounds.
Coming off, and so we'll paint, finished wood with that and stuff. So there's little, we're just paying attention to those kind of materials we use when we have to get them from another source.
Yeah.
But most of the home that we're looking at is built out of straw as the primary insulation, sand and clay. And so there's an adobe lime actually plaster on the outside, and we mix that up. There's a man here in town named Kale who is the lead on all the natural plasters and the earthen floors inside. And we were mixing those up on site using sand, local sand, clay, water, and then mixing in some lime for that outside. And there's 3 coats on the outside, a rough coat that covers the straw and the diamond lap that surrounds the window bucks. And then there's a brown coat that's a leveling coat. And into that brown coat, we actually inserted some specific preparations that Viva la Vida has imported from Italy, from the Nova Terra Community, is a community based in Italy. And the Vida is a company that makes agricultural and architectural therapeutic homeopathic products specific to concrete, to plaster, to paints, and beyond. And so we put these preparations both into the concrete in the foundation of the building and also into the plaster in the walls and into the paints that painted the drywall. And these products are essentially therapeutic homeopathic products to affect the more subtle, qualitative, energetic dynamics of the materials that we're using. Yeah.
Are these in effect similar to biodynamic preparations?
Very similar.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And they originated, the man who designed these, Enzo Nastati, is kind of the teacher and the inspiration for the Viva la Vida Foundation, and he's been working for 40 years in Europe, based out of Italy, was the head of Demeter in Italy, which is the biodynamic certifying agent in Italy, and then moved on from there to creating his own products inspired by the biodynamic preparations and the work of Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy.
Yep.
So these products are coming from that source, and we've had it's been a powerful process just to incorporate these preparations, these products into our plasters, into our concrete. When the concrete truck came in and poured this foundation, which is pretty massive, this foundation is actually formed in the shape of a pedestal, of a capital. So it's almost like a rhombus. So the base of the foundation is a lot bigger than the top, and the top is already pretty wide because it needs to support the straw bales that are 16 inches in width.
Yep.
So the top is about 16 inches, and I think the base is more like 3 feet.
Wow.
And there's a specific golden mean ratio that was used for the form of that foundation. And that was designed in that way more for the facilitation of the earthly forces, the earthly ground, so to speak, and you could call it the Schumann Resonance, the field, the energetic qualities that are present in the earth and that are streaming up from the earth. We want to facilitate the ascent of those forces up into the house, much in the way that a tree grows and has its kind of base that's a little wider and funnels up kind of into the trunk of the tree. We're incorporating that dynamic and form through the foundation to come up into the house.
So even the simple concrete foundation has so much going on beyond your typical conventional home. The shape, the geometry, the preps. Wow, it's an alchemical structure, really.
It is. Yeah, and a lot of the work is based in alchemy and the understanding of working with these elements in the elemental table. not just in a physical sense, but in a qualitative, energetic sense. There's a very intentional layout for the house. Right now we're standing on the south end, and the door here is on the south side of the house, along with 4 windows. And there's a very practical, passive solar aspect to that, in terms of this straw bale house is super insulated, being built out of straw bales, but also when we're getting this passive solar gain from the south side that, heats up the home when the windows are open in the winter, and with the lower angle of the sun to the south during the winter time. And so we're getting a lot of passive gain, but there's also an energetic quality to having the door open to the south. And in our studies, we talk about how there's a current that moves from the south that we call the current of bios, or life. That life kind of moves from the south. And we know if we go south towards the equator, the abundance of life that is present there. And so incorporating this into our homes, and we do it in our farms and gardens to try and enter in from the south, because when we enter in from the south, we're entering in with the life, and we're also inviting the life into our homes, into our gardens. And so I like to speak about pairing both the functional, maybe more practical, maybe more materialistic understanding with also qualitative, energetic, Feng Shui or harmonic understanding of these other elements. So the layout of the house incorporates some of these directional components. We enter in from the south, and if we were to imagine a kind of square, just like the house is based on this square, there's a quadrant, and we could place the 4 elements in each quadrant, starting with the fire in the south, in the southeast, and that's where we find the kitchen in the home. Then moving to the southwest, we have the air element, and that's where the living room is, an upstairs bedroom. And then in the northwest, we have the water quadrant, and that's where all the plumbing comes into the house, all the water is, and the 2 bathrooms on the first story and the second story are located in that water quadrant of the northwest. And then the earth quadrant is in the northeast, and the staircase is in that region, as well as storage. So we're incorporating some of these alchemical elements into the layout of the house, and then into the materials and the building process.
Beautiful. Well, what do you think? Should we go inside?
Let's go inside.
That'd be great.
Taking note as we go in this entry post, we've been trying to take off any sharp corners. So these posts were routed down just to be a little smoother, a little more inviting.
Nice 45-degree angle on there, right?
Yep. And ideally it could have even been a little stronger. But you'll see as we enter into the house that we've really done our best to try and minimize as many right angles as possible. And even the right angles, you'll see a theme in this house is this rhombus. So in a sense it's a diamond or a square. It's a square, but you're facing the point. And so it's all based on your orientation to it. And when you encounter that square that's been turned 90 degrees and now it's a diamond or a rhombus that you're facing, it's much more dynamic and living. And these windows from the outside, you can see there's the straw bale relief around, and there's a very specific angle between the outside and the inside. And that's where the light enters into the building. And we've done this nice golden mean triangular kind of relief above the windows, all to facilitate the exchange of light from the outside to the inside.
Yeah, and it's beautiful how thick the walls are, right? It's a property of straw bales, obviously.
Yes, very thick.
Means it's a high-performing building in terms of its thermal properties.
Huge thermal mass, and we can feel, for listeners, as we're entering into this house, it's notably cooler, at least 7 degrees cooler, and that's without any AC or any swamp cooler or anything. That's just the thermal mass and the insulative properties of the straw bale home.
Beautiful.
And we shift from a lime plaster on the outside here to a marble lime plaster on the inside that's much smoother and very light.
Oh yeah, it's much cooler in here. Very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite warm outside today.
Yeah. So this house,
Oh, beautiful.
there were a number of artisan craftsmen that helped in this house, and I was just mostly a laborer working and learning the straw bale building, the natural plasters, and some carpentry.
That ironwork is spectacular.
Absolutely.
It's exquisite.
Yeah, and so this metalworking was done by a man named Ira Glass, who lives here in Paonia, Hotchkiss area, and is an incredible metal worker. We also have tile work that was done here by a man named Chad, who's a part of the Viva Vida Foundation work. And then we're standing here on the first story on this earthen floor. That's pretty unique. Not very many homes have these kind of floors. They're more popular down in New Mexico, Arizona. And essentially this was also made out of sand, clay, water, some straw, and also preparations that we put into the floor. And it has radiant tubing, so there's radiant tubing that was put down in this floor so it can be heated up through the heating system. Right? Currently there's not any hot water heating, solar hot water heating plugged up. There's only an on-demand water heater.
Yeah.
But that could easily be added on at a future time.
Now I know more and more of our audience are becoming familiar and even practicing grounding, right? Taking off our shoes and walking on the soil, on the land. And I'm wondering, in a building like this, do we get a similar effect?
We do.
Right here.
That's
incredible.
If you're barefoot on this earth, you're grounded. That Schumann Resonance, that ionic exchange is happening.
Yeah.
And the woman who currently lives here, named Mia, is a very sensitive, a beautiful woman who works with Viva Vida, and she speaks about that a lot as just being grounded. Always barefoot downstairs here. So that element is present.
Yeah, beautiful.
And we also see, if we come over to the bathroom, some really nice tile work done by Chad. And there's a rhombus type shaped tile. And what's interesting is I was actually just in Europe in February, and we were visiting around Spain and Italy these old cathedrals, right? These ancient cathedrals. And walking into these cathedrals, the tile work and the mosaics are stunning. And almost always the tiles are laid in that orientation of a diamond. And you walk into the floors and it's just that diamond going out. And so we want to pay attention to what maybe our ancestors and the ancients practiced with consciousness, because they understood the effect that some of these, maybe what we would consider now as more aesthetic qualities, are actually really affecting our inner nature and our soul and in the spaces that we surround ourselves with. So we're paying attention to that with the tile, with the rounding out and smoothing out of the corners, with the colors.
Absolutely beautiful. It feels good to be in here.
Yeah.
And I know there are so many spaces, so many buildings. For example, just walking into a big box retail store, I just don't feel very good being in some of those spaces. And my goodness, what a tremendous opportunity we have to understand the ways we're being affected by our built environment, and to incorporate that going forward as much as possible.
And we work, a big part of building this home was also learning the how to compromise the contrast between the ideal of the design, and then the practical implementation of that design into current modes of construction, working with contractors who have no basis around, an energetic, qualitative experience of building. They're maybe coming from more of a place of efficiency, and we actually have to slow down the process and explain to them what we want to do and why we want to do it. For example, the electrical that was run in this building, we actually submerged all the wires, just the coating of the wires, and coated them in a product. One of the Viva La Vida products that would help to mitigate some of the harmful effects of the EMF, the electromagnetic field that's created within a circuit of electricity. And so we look at, well, maybe in the ideal home, in terms of quality, we wouldn't have electricity running beside us when we're sleeping, or we wouldn't be so close in contact with electricity for how it affects our nervous system and all these things. But we also recognize the utilitarian, the helpfulness of electricity, and that it helps us to do so many things in our life. So how can we introduce a therapy that might help to round out, and kind of harmonize some of the more harmful effects of the electricity? But then we have to explain that to our electrician.
Right. This is a new thing probably for some folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me, some of the great thinkers in the sustainability movement over the last several decades have been, in different ways, whether it's in terms of building or in terms of business operations and so forth, efficiency does not always equate to effectiveness. And when we're super focused on efficiency, yes, we may achieve certain results within a very narrow kind of framework of what we're looking at or measuring or thinking about. But in terms of the effectiveness of our overall well-being as humans alive on the planet for hopefully several decades each, there's a whole different measure, really, it seems, in terms of quality and quality of life. You mentioned traveling in Europe. We know from our travels over there and some of the maturation of cultural norms in places like that there's more of an emphasis on quality versus efficiency or quantity or what have you. And here in the United States, we have a real need, a real challenge, and I think a real opportunity to orient our focus toward the quality.
Absolutely. And recognizing that for that quality, oftentimes it takes more time and it takes more money and more resources. And that's part of our challenge too, And to speak to the construction industry, these practices that have become ingrained around efficiency and timelines and bottom line budgeting for homes that we live in is, I believe, is a real problem. And actually Rudolf Steiner, who, was the foundation for Waldorf schools and for biodynamic farming, said back in 1920s, around the turn of the century, that more and more one of the biggest problems for humanity will be the spaces that we inhabit and how they affect our psychic, somatic well-being. And we're seeing some more results, as you mentioned, around mold infestations in homes and stuff, but we're not yet seeing on a larger scale discussions around the qualitative elements of how we live in the homes we live in. And this is a recent development in the past 100, 200 years that we've been building homes as unconsciously and as efficiently as we have been, and seeing the materials that are being used without the gratitude, without the welcoming, without the appreciation that our ancestors and people still around the world today have. People, I've heard the stories of, the people in Africa who come together and they they're building a home out of their, clay and local resources, because that's what they have. But there's an initiation for the building, and the building is treated as a living being that is, holding this family, right? And it goes through its own stages of initiation, of maybe not being painted for the first year, and once the family's lived in the home for a year, and if they had a good year, then the community gathers around and will paint the home all together. And so these type of processes of barn raisings, in the Amish community, of what is a barn raising and how are these elements of community and appreciation and initiation affecting the qualitative aspects. Not to mention, of course, barn raisings are generally timber frame homes, built from solid wood pieces, and in Africa they're building with clay and straw and manure, and that all helps. Yeah. But into this home, we really tried to bring some of those elements. So every time we introduced a preparation, a product into the plaster, into the concrete, or we brought in, as you'll see upstairs, this amazing wood floor that was laid in, we tried our best to welcome the materials in and acknowledge that we were building together, collectively, an entity, a building, and the building was greater than the sum of the materials that we used to create it. But it was a combination of the hard labor, the hard effort that was put in by the workmen, but also the whole community that was surrounding the building process. Even if they weren't physically involved, they were witnessing it and they were holding it in their own meditative way as welcoming a home coming into existence.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this Greek word oikos, and it's that root word from which we get the word ecology. Curiously, we also get the word economy from oikos, and oikos means home. And in ancient Greece, we would refer to this as oikos. And in addition, you would have a front room like this one here that would be called the oikos within the home, which had this implicit meaning of community, of receiving your neighbors and your guests. And I'm really struck that in so many traditions and indigenous cultures, a home is just pregnant with relationships of community. And when we look around suburban America, like where I grew up, you have almost the opposite. There can be such an experience of isolation. And typically, I think, in this culture at this moment, a lot of us are living in places built by people we've never met. And what an incredible opportunity and insight we have here to reorient and really re-understand what we're doing with places where we're spending a whole lot of our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, what we surround ourselves with. And I think of that a lot, is when speaking to efficiency and effectiveness, when a home is built, in a couple months, in 3 months, and it was maybe more cost effective. It still sells for a lot, and it's a lot to buy a home and stuff, but there's no living relationship to the space as such. And more so, I think, more importantly, culturally, we're not holding the space for the spaces that we create to become space holders. And so we're just inhabiting buildings. Okay. And maybe that oikos, that real sense of home, is missing in a lot of ways. But we also recognize that we bring that and we gift that sense of home. But all of the nature that surrounds us wants to participate in that and contribute to that. And we live in the great home. And so how can these spaces that we inhabit be a heightened sense of our connection, and not an isolation and a detachment from nature and the life-giving forces that surround us on this beautiful planet?
It's poetic, Stone. Yeah, you want to go upstairs?
Let's head upstairs.
This is great, man.
We have a fireplace here in the center. This little fireplace would heat the whole home in winter easily. And we'll see, this will be the first winter that Mia's living in this home. She might not even need to heat it up because of the thermal properties of the home. You've got a
lot of solar game.
A lot of solar game and thermal mass in the floor.
And the woodwork and the cabinetry is exquisite.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And as we go up, we'll see this railing with this theme of bringing in the plant kingdom in union with the mineral crystal kingdom.
Beautiful.
And these stairwells that were finished by a man named Nick, who works with us in Viva La Vida. Did some fine finish carpentry work on the stairs, and there were some resident artists who actually painted these geometric sequences and also local indigenous plants on the risers.
So this is just fabulous.
You'll notice too as you come up the stairs this little Madonna.
Yeah.
And Enzo Nastati, who lives in Italy, is very familiar with the Madonnas. Now this little Madonna too is a part of a therapeutic quality, and part of that is because this stairwell ideally would have turned the opposite way. And so we just walked up the stairs, and as we were walking up the stairs to the upper story, we were turning to our left. And we work a lot with the difference between this left-hand turn and this right-hand turn, or a left-hand vortex and a right-hand vortex. And ideally, when we are going upstairs, we would actually be turning sunwise or to our right in a kind of clockwise fashion. And in that orientation, we're kind of preparing ourselves to enter up into a higher, perhaps, plane of consciousness, maybe more, a less dense, materialistic, everyday type of consciousness, but maybe a more preparation for sleeping. As the bedrooms are up on this story, it's more of an elevated state. And when we enter back down onto the first story, we would want to go the opposite way in the stairway, going to our left, turning counterclockwise. And so in this home, due to the layout of the bathroom and such, the stairwell wasn't able to be put in that orientation. And so the Madonna was put at this landing to kind of correct that change.
Yeah, that's a very powerful image to encounter on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Just
and with the form too, you see the in that form is that a catenary arch, which is really powerful and is used a lot at the eco-village Nova Terra in Italy, where Enzo lives.
Beautiful.
So up here we have, as we come into these upper stories, this beautiful wood floor, oriented again with this rhombus shape, this herringbone layout on the floor. And we have a sequence here also of 3+1, this kind of 3+1, and we work with that numerology and symbology a lot in our esoteric schooling in spiritual science. And there's actually, these are two different kinds of wood. I believe it's a maple and oak. So 3 oak, 1 maple, 3 oak, and 1 maple. And it was just an exquisite floor. Before the wood was actually put in place, we spent some time giving just a prayer, a welcoming with its origin before laying the floor.
Beautiful.
So we have 2 bedrooms here, one to the right, one to the left, a little office space. A lot of light coming in. Finished woodwork. And then this bathroom that's on the right really is pretty exquisite as well. And especially the shower.
So this was in the water quadrant of the...
Yes, we're in the northwest portion of the house now, and I mean it's interesting to meditate on some of these concepts and not just take it for a word. But if you travel in the United States up into the northwest, I lived for a little while up in Olympia, Washington. It's like there's a lot of water there. I travel down into the south and the southeast, southwest, a lot of fire, dryness. Or if you go into the northeast and sense just how rich in earth the fertility is and the farming that comes from there, it's like these elements are present in the direction. So we have a Chad who did this work and did a lot of great work bringing in the kind of S, and there's a yin yang. He even made it so there's not a square meeting in the corners of the shower.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, I'm struck just thinking that it was just a few months ago that Notre Dame burned.
Yeah.
And so many of us worldwide, millions and millions and millions of us, felt this ache, this, oh my gosh, something lost. And fortunately, the damage wasn't as extensive as it could have been. But I'm curious because there's so much time and attention and understanding, really, of things like geometry and some of the more what we would call nowadays esoteric knowledge. But that's part of why a place like Notre Dame is so exquisitely valuable and important to us. And my gosh, to have even just a bit of that intentionality and even we could call it spirituality in our homes, what a difference that might make.
Absolutely. And perhaps what an opportunity and maybe a message it is to us that the old is beautiful, but we can't rest on our laurels. And in fact, we need to keep moving forward. And we need to integrate what was past and what we've learned from the past with what is arising in the present and the future, and really lean into building new homes that are even more incredible and more appropriate for what we're living, the times that we're living in now.
Absolutely beautiful.
And so we hope that this home can be an example of that, of just the beginning of, there are some other homes now being constructed in Paonia, and we're really trying to imagine, what will the homes of the future need to be that are really the homes of the present, because we need new forces and to be re-inspired and reimagine our connection to each other and to life. And
it's such an essential theme. This is the Geist, if you will, of Rudolf Steiner, of taking from the past, learning from the past, but moving forward with an entirely new gnosis, really, of what it means to be alive on the planet in these modern times.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough in February, between traveling in Spain and Italy, to travel to Basel in Switzerland and to visit the Goetheanum in Dornach, Arschlem. And the Goetheanum, that's the second building at the headquarters of the Anthroposophic Society. But to see the buildings that they've built in the surrounding community, not just the Goetheanum, but the surrounding buildings that were built by Rudolf Steiner or designed by Rudolf Steiner, and the Gestalt, and the uniqueness of each building, but the tie, you see how they're all tied in together. And for me, it was especially potent, but it was also almost like a glimpse into the future of like, wow, this feels like it's come from a future time, and not in like the futuristic sense of flying cars and stuff.
It's not George Jetson and all that stuff.
No, but in the qualitative sense of attention, appreciation, organic forms, and also numerology and sacred geometry that is so present, and it's like a new reverence, for home and building and place.
Pattern and rhythm and gosh,
color, a lot of color, working with color. Yeah, very nice.
Fabulous. Well, let me just take a moment to mention to our viewers that, of course, this is the Why on Earth Community's Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series. And today we have such a delightful gift of an experience here, touring this home with Stone Hunter, having this experience. And I want to be sure to mention too that if anybody of you would like to get in touch with Stone or learn more about this kind of practice and approach to life, you can go to VivaLaVida Foundation.org. So it's VivaLaVida Foundation.org. We'll put that in the show notes. And want to also thank our sponsors who are making this podcast and our Why on Earth community mobilization work possible. This includes Patagonia, Waylay Waters, Purium, Earth Coast Productions, the Association of Waldorf Schools of North America, and the Lidge Family Foundation. So thanks to all of you for making this possible. And we want to thank our monthly donors. We have a growing community of folks who are giving on a monthly basis at whatever level works well for each of you. And if you haven't yet joined our monthly giving program, you can go to whyonearth.org to do that. And when you do that, we will send you a special code to unlock unlimited free access to all of our ebook and audiobook resources. So it's a wonderful win-win for everybody. And Stone, you and I met at Sustainable Settings. We've both worked there, love spending time there. And we met in the context of agriculture, of growing food, of working with land. And I'm so struck by the interplay, and of course this pattern of the limnoscale is important in a lot of this work, the interplay between agriculture, land, soil, even wilderness, and what we're doing in our built environments, in our urban, suburban communities. And it seems that you are living a bridge, a nexus between all of that. And it's just wonderful to have this opportunity to converse with you and to hear some of the wisdom that you're not only holding in your heart and mind and sharing with folks as an educator, but you are literally embodying this into buildings. And I'm just curious if you might riff on that a little bit, that connection between soil, land, agriculture, and buildings, built environment.
Yeah, well, for me personally, I mean, part of my background was that I grew up, my father was a stonemason, and so I grew up doing stone patios and dry stack walls. And there was something so gratifying about such physical labor that was, that at least would last my lifetime. Yeah. And that I could, go back 2 years later and say, oh yeah, I laid this stonework, I built this wall. And that comes, in my heritage too, of a family of builders. Mm. And so growing up with that kind of work ethic was important for me and very physical. And when I started getting into agriculture more and milking cows every day and harvesting vegetables and working with the land, I really tuned in then to the rhythmical sense and the rhythm of the seasons. And my sleep changed, my body changed as I attuned myself through the animals, through the plants and the land and the compost to living with the season. And at the same time, so much of that process too was working within the natural world and creating, and especially in the world of domestication, right? With domesticated cows and sheep, horses, and dogs and honeybees. And so there's, in that zone of domestication, we have the meeting of the wild, so to speak, with the human element. And there's that area that's been created between them. And so coming into building, for me, is like, in a sense, we can also place in these quadrants, in our 4 quadrants, this relationship between the mineral kingdom and the earth, the plant kingdom and the watery element, the animal kingdom and what we call the air element, and the human element that we associate with the fire. And so in agriculture, it was like I was able to really, in some way, work the full spectrum between the animals, the plants, and the minerals. But coming into building now, it's almost pretty direct from the human. It's like pretty much human and mineral to some extent. We get to work with wood that's coming from the living but is already dead, or metal, in this way. And it's like kind of from the most inert to the most living. And so as humans, the homes that we build is completely, in a sense, outside of the sphere of something that nature can create on its own. And I love to milk a cow or grow a plant and be a part of just stewarding nature to do its own thing. But I think we really sense in our built environment that this is where the human element is creating something almost completely out of itself, in connection, obviously, with the resources that are available. But if we look at this home, it's like we try to introduce elements of golden mean ratios, say, or things we would find in nature. But this is something that would never be created out of nature by itself. So I've been really increasingly interested in our capacity as humans to to introduce something new that is in harmony with natural laws, with natural geometries, in resonance with that, but is also a gift, can become a gift. And we do this when we make the biodynamic preparations, and we introduce something, a new synthesis that nature could never achieve by itself, by introducing our creativity, our joy, and our imagination back into the natural world, inspired by it, but we take it through us and create a new synthesis with what's available to elaborate it and then gift it back to the environment and to all the kingdoms. So this is the kind of weaving that I've been working with in terms of agriculture and the seasonal rhythm, and then the more solid based, built environment, and human world that is increasingly becoming more and more visible. And perhaps we could say, the current is that's the way things are going. There's more humans, more and more built environment. And so in the stream of permaculture, anthroposophy, why not recognize that that's the movement, that things are going, but we have a choice in how we build these environments and how we engage with what we are choosing to create for our sustenance and for our communities, but integrate it in such a way that it is harmonic and it is in resonance with the natural laws that created us and sustain us.
It's absolutely beautiful. It makes me think that one of our opportunities, as we're talking about different aspects and dimensions of stewardship and sustainability, is to reorient our thinking about we humans on this planet, right? So many of us think of us as a scourge, or we are a virus, and sure, you can find those kinds of patterns. What I'm hearing on this other hand is, what if we are the creative gifts? What if we become the gestures of stewardship, of care, of joy, of creativity? And in the biodynamic world, of course, we hear more and more that we humans are the preparation. And there's this relationship that I know is held sacred in so many cultures, and it is all around the planet, of we humans being here to be good, great stewards of this place and of each other in our communities. And the way you're describing this, Stone, it creates for me a beautiful, a hopeful, a realistic, a grounded vision of where we get to be in our culture, what we get to create together if we so choose.
Absolutely. And I think that's the story that we choose. It's powerful. It's really powerful. And the orientation we take within ourselves, within our family, within our community, of our hearts and our minds. And I think it's very needed at this time to illumine some alternative stories that are ancient but also new, and being renewed around this piece of the human being as a gift and as a steward and as a co-creator, in life. And we have maybe a lot more power than we've ever dreamed of, and rightfully so. We're just gradually awakening to that. So all the full spectrum is needed, but that we can gradually mature as a species and recognize how infantile we have been, and maybe we've gone through this phase of real forgetfulness, and maybe there is a gift in that, but now we are emerging and reawakening to the capacities we have to gift life, to bestow life, and to steward it in right relation. And may we all take take that to heart in whatever way we choose in that freedom. But it's a gift. It's a real gift to be here. And so thank you for asking me to share a bit with you, and really grateful to continue the work. And for all those listening, we'd love to be in touch, and we know the network is growing, and so many individuals are really finding their niche and their individual calling into the work that they feel that they've come here to do. And we want to connect those and link more and more networks and see what is arising in different parts of the world.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well, to things like that, I like to say, amen, aho, so mote it be. And what an exquisite afternoon to spend with you, Stone. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
The Y on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series is hosted by Aaron William Perry, author, thought leader, and executive consultant. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. To sign up as a daily, weekly, or monthly supporter, please visit yonearth.org/support. Support packages start at just $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. You can get discounts on their products and services using the code YONEARTH, all one word with a Y. These sponsors are listed on the yonearth.org/support page. If you found this particular podcast episode especially insightful, informative, or inspiring, please pass it on and share it with a friend whom you think will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being a part of the Y on Earth community.